Hi there. My name is Jessica Crow, and I am the founder of Apogy, which is a change management training and consulting firm. And this is Change Leader Insights, which is a video series that I have created to interview people who are experts in change management, are change leaders in their organization, or have some perspective, opinion, expertise in the areas of change. And today I have Michelle Yanahan with ChangeFit 360. Thank you so much for being here. It's nice to meet you.
Oh, it's great to meet you, Jessica, and I'm thrilled to be here, part of the list of people that you've had on your show, and excited about our discussion today.
Yeah, definitely. So Michelle and I, we're connected through many different industry forums. ACMP, Association of Change Management Professionals, being one of them. I've heard Michelle talk. We've been on forums together, and she reached out and had this great idea to talk about human-centric change. So, wanted to give her that platform, give you all this conversation because I have no doubt we'll learn a lot from Michelle. But before we get into that, Michelle, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself, more about who you are in ChangeFit 360?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. So just like you, I have primarily a training, but also a consulting and coaching business, ChangeFit 360. We do public training, corporate training, some coaching and consulting on the side. I say we do everything change. So we help organization teams and individuals embed change. We're a qualified education provider for ACMP, SHRM, and International Coaching Federation, which is new.
Very
And
cool.
I
Congrats.
love to thanks. And I love to work not only with corporate clients and public courses. I love to give back in ACMP and ATD and SHRM and PMI, all those industry associations that I think are so critical for human connection. So I love it. It's all I do is, every variation of change, from change agility to change management to change leadership, setting up communities of practice or centers of excellence, you name it. I've got my hands in it.
Very nice. Well, and then so the topic of human-centric change, this is clearly top of
Yes.
mind for you. Would love to hear
Yes.
your perspective. How would you define human-centric change?
Yeah, so I think first of all, stepping back a little bit, I think the time for this is right. If you
Absolutely.
look at what's happening in organizations, and COVID maybe was the start of it, or maybe we were already there. Some of the social movements, COVID, quiet quitting, the great resignation, and then you put in the mix that companies are trying to be more strategic and continue to innovate, and just the amount of change, the volume of change that's on people, we're just saturated and fatigued.
Hmm.
And if you also think about kind of traditional change management, it can be somewhat systematic. And what I
Hmm.
mean by that is, we definitely have created, not we, but the industry has created change management as a discipline similar to project management, step
Right.
1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And while that's great from a learning curve perspective, that doesn't necessarily map with how people adapt or adopt to change.
I
And
agree
so
with you.
when I say human-centric change, really what I'm saying is more of a focus on what people feel. If you think about
Hmm.
traditional change management and what we're really good at, what we've really ingrained is what people need to know, think communications and training for change, and what people need to do. If I show you in
Hmm.
training, I have you do it. And you and I both know just because I tell you something and I show you doesn't mean you change. If
Yeah.
that was true, you would tell me, don't eat ice cream for dinner every night, Michelle, because it's bad for you. And I would then never probably eat ice cream for dinner again. And simply that doesn't happen.
No, right.
So we've been focused on the need to know and need to do, which are important, but the element of kind of need to feel, which is really more again that human element, I think is missing.
Hmm.
And if I think about that, that's really about, as a human being, is it okay for me to be human? Meaning,
Hmm. Hmm.
can I adapt at my own pace? Can I make a mistake? Can I have a failure in going through this and still feel psychologically safe and protected in my environment? Is this change? Do I have enough bandwidth to even take all this on? Is it even feasible?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
again, just some kind of common elements of so I would say human-centric change is essentially allowing people, to make things normal that are as part of being a human being. Right?
Yeah.
And
It's very much a mindset shift and how we,
very
I was
much.
on a webinar in January where I brought up the topic of human-centric change, and someone asked, well, how is that different than what change managers have always been doing? We've always been focused on people. And a lot of the things that you just described,
Mhm.
I reiterated that. And I think the way that I like to think about it is we're caring for the human side of change.
I love that.
I agree with you too that the time is right, that pre-pandemic, there was less of an appetite, or I don't know what it was, but the environment wasn't right for that level of empathy and compassion that exists
Yes.
today, where
Yes.
there's more of an understanding that all change has to go through people to get implemented, and people are feeling fatigued that their work
Absolutely.
life and their home life, they blend together, and compartmentalizing is just not, how people operate. And so there's just much
Absolutely.
more of a appreciation for, let's bring your whole selves to work, obviously appropriately, but bring your whole selves
Yes.
to work. And we value you for who you are. And we take into consideration those factors that you just described. So
Yeah.
I love that the way you explained it. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
Um,
and I also think, Jessica, if I could just jump
mhm,
in, I
please.
think there's a nice balance between, again, traditional change management. We still need the process. We still
Absolutely.
need, the people to know and people to do, right? And we don't want to be so far the other way that, no, that's okay that you didn't do it, and we can wait
Yeah.
2 years for you to come along. So
Yeah.
I think it is less it's about bringing some nuances into our toolkit that
Hmm.
care for that human self, but
Hmm.
also, right, we've got a job to do. After all, we're doing change to get organizational benefits ROI of our projects, and we still need to achieve that. So
Hmm.
I think it's a balance, unless, it's not one or the other, I guess is what I would
Yeah.
say.
I agree. Yeah.
It's bringing in some elements. I have 8 elements that I'm kind of focused on in order to bring it forward, and bringing
Yeah.
those into what we do today, right? Just being more mindful or intentional
Yeah.
about the human, and how much change and how they individually are adapting and adapting to change.
Yeah. I was going to ask what,
Yes.
recognizing that many practitioners have been trained in the traditional methodology, what would you recommend they do differently? What mindset, tools, practices could they
Yeah.
integrate into their approach that would deliver more of that human centric experience?
Yeah. So a couple come to mind, and these are some of the elements I discussed or
Hmm.
described. One is, I'm very much a proponent of appreciative inquiry. And for your folks that may not know what that is, it's simply, right, how do we look and build and start from and continue through the process with what's positive and strengths of an organization, of teams, of individuals.
Hmm.
And in organizations and as humans, we very much like to start from the deprecated place. We like to
Right.
problem solve. Our minds want to solve problems. So we always go there. What didn't work? What can we fix? What can we
Hmm.
improve? And again, back to balance. It's important to be aware of all that. But there are positive strengths of organizations, teams, individuals, and the last change we did that we can pull forward. So I think
Hmm.
that by starting with positive and kind of pulling that forward, that helps tap into the good. So that's
Yeah.
it sounds simple, maybe not as simple as it sounds, but that's something that I'm very much kind of top of mind. I've been talking about that topic for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Another thing that I think that lots of practitioners and organizations don't aren't aware of, or if they're aware of it, we don't really work with it the right way, is how much change, right? And
Yeah.
really getting in the shoes of the people that we're trying to have adapt and adopt that change. And so I have a heat map. And what I like to do with that heat map is say, number one, here's all the change that this stakeholder group is experiencing right now. Is that okay, leader? Right.
Hmm.
And you know the drill here, Jessica. The leader's going to say, "Yep, Michelle, we've got to move forward with all that because all that has been budgeted, planned, paid for, etc." Okay.
Hmm.
So step one is, do we have to move forward with all this? And the answer, 99.9% of the time is yes, right? So then the next question is, okay, for any of these efforts that are concurrently happening, and I'm not just talking about go live, I'm talking about the entire period it takes for
Hmm.
people to adopt, become proficient, and sustain that change.
Hmm.
The second question is, can we chunk these in some way where they feel smaller, less heavy? And again, Jessica, you and I both know 99.9% of the time, or maybe 90% or higher, leader says, nope, Michelle, Jessica, we can't do that. So then what do we do? And this is where we as change professionals or practitioners, I think, can play.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have this heat map, we can actually look and say, what are some like for like projects, that are hitting stakeholder groups, maybe same change impact? And
Mm-hmm.
do we have the opportunity to do one communication versus two, one training versus two, kind of simplify the weight of change
Yeah.
without losing the value? And sometimes the answer is no, right? But at least we're being intentional. We're using a visualization, some data from change impact to make some decisions. And we're trying to get out in front of, yes, there's a ton of change, right? And we know people are fatigued and saturated. And so we're trying to lead it from more the way they are adapting and adopting it, which you and I both know is not one project at a time. It's everything that's on my desk.
Right.
So that's two things I would say. Another one, just kind of picking up my favorites here.
Yeah.
Another one is, I think organizations, and a lot of this is big culture shift too, won't happen overnight, and some organizations won't be open to it, but something for change folks to think about. I think we need to normalize change resistance. Um,
Yes. Thank you.
yeah, I,
It's part
I
of
mean,
the process. It's normal.
yes, it's part of the process. And if we normalize it and say it's okay, and we actually look at it like what I think it really is, which is a differing viewpoint, maybe the voice of reason, devil's advocate, call it whatever you want,
Mm-hmm.
it can become a very value add part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think organizations oftentimes we're like, we hear resistance, that's all bad. We got to squash that, go get rid of that. Something's not happening right. When in turn, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we can capture and bring that resistance, that voice into how we lead change, again, we're using more that caring approach for humans,
Yeah.
understanding that we're all individuals, we all think differently about things, and we've got to be inclusive in what we think. So,
Yeah.
three things: positive and strengths, big picture with some ideas about how to mitigate the weight, and then resistance as normalized.
Yeah. Oh, I love those. Those are really helpful.
Yeah.
Two questions for you. One, and this sort of stems from what you were just explaining. One, what are your thoughts on the value and opportunity for change management practitioners to move further upstream, recognizing they might be able to get some of those important conversations going before the decisions are made, right? And have more
Yes.
air traffic control, opportunity. And then the second question is, what are your thoughts on the terminology, or at least thinking about developing organizational resilience versus
Mhm.
focusing on resistance? This is something that I have talked about, but there still seems to be a little bit of a disconnect in terms of what that means. But because resistance is part of the process, it's healthy, it's normal, there's value in it. How would you maybe phrase
Yeah.
what that other side is? So, first question being, where can change managers go further upstream in the decision making? Do you agree, and what does that look like?
Yes. I was lucky enough back when I was in corporate America before I ever started my organization that I moved myself up to the part of the project management process where we were conceptualizing projects. And so we had
Yeah.
early in terms of, even without all the information, early in to start to shape what it would look like and what we needed to think about.
Yeah.
I think change belongs at that table. And you're right, in many organizations, it's, oh, you're training communication, so I can
Yeah.
just give it to you later down. And so I think there's a misunderstanding in many organizations, and Jessica, you clearly get this, that change is, just training and communications, and it's meant to make people feel happy, which I
Yeah.
would argue is not the case at all.
Yeah.
So the further upstream or closer to project initiation, inception, or even conceptualization we are at, I think the better. And with that being said, I think also having sort of, and it's hard to say an enterprise viewpoint of change, but a larger lens than just one project initiative or effort is also helpful to kind of help size and think about that, how that's going to shape together. So I'm a
Yeah.
huge proponent of let's get in early, let's get in as much as we can. Even if the project gets killed, at least there were, some eyes on it, some forethought about the people side and what else is happening in the environment.
Yeah, there's
I think that's
someone looking at it and thinking about it
yes.
with that lens that I'm sure the other leaders in the room are thinking about, but not with the same intention and purpose. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
We need to be at the table.
yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely. And what about
Second,
the other side? Yeah.
yeah, the second question is the resilience.
Hmm.
So I think personally that especially given where we are with COVID and all these other things. But even
Mhm.
before that, I would have said
Yeah.
this, that resilience is a skill of today, not tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
That, if I go to an organization today, right, and they have 20 changes and I say, Jessica, I'm quitting here because there's just too much change. And I go to another organization, guess what? Different
Same.
change, different, yeah, you can't escape it, right?
Yeah.
So you either have to, what's the old saying? You gotta, if you quit or you join, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
think I think resilience for me really is, how can we find and make people aware and more visible about proof points of success?
Yes.
And people might say, especially people who are highly resistant to change might say, I hate all change. It's always hard for me. But I always go back to kind of a fun dialoguing tool that I have. I'll just share it with you real quick for your listeners.
Yeah.
They can put it into their toolkit.
Wonderful.
If you think back, and this works with everybody unless you've been at one job your entire life. Okay, so if you've had more than one job, this works. You have somebody think back to, a day one of a new job, whatever job it is, and you ask them, okay, day one of your new job, how comfortable did you feel? How quickly could you do whatever your kind of routine tasks and responsibilities are, maybe day one to day 4 weeks or so?
Hmm.
How quickly, and what kind of errors did you make? What kind of error ratio? So it's day one. We all come in day one. We're probably not super comfortable. We're probably making errors, and it's going to take us longer to do whatever because we're learning the culture and the systems and the people, et cetera, et cetera. So now, if you fast forward, I say 6 months, but could be 3 months, I don't know, and you ask somebody about that same job, where they are in their level of comfort, speed, and error ratio. 99.9%. I had one person who went against me, so even more than that. I use it all the time in training. Um, will say, yeah, I'm more comfortable, I've got more speed, and I've got less errors. And then, so that's a success proof point. But even more
Yeah.
importantly than that, my next question is, well, how did you get there? What was most responsible for you growing comfort, speed, proficiency, error ratio, or errors going down? And then they tell you, da, 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 da. So another thing I like to do with that is say, number one, you've just shown me you can get through change. And number
Mhm.
two, you've told me what was most responsible for you getting there. If I can point to, in the change we're doing now, those
Mhm.
elements, or build those elements into my change, guess what? Your success elements are there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all of a sudden, their resistance, their fear, their resiliency, changes based on that
Yeah.
dynamic or that dialogue.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite kind of one-to-one or group dialogue, to say everybody's had success with change. It could
Yeah.
not, it's not exactly the same person to person in what got them there or what success looks like, but we all have a proof point we can lean back on. And once
Yeah.
you've been successful, it's easier to say, yeah, I can be successful on the next one.
Yeah, that's such a great example. And then I'm imagining how that has contributed to one of your 8 elements that's in your human-centric change recommendation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Showing success
Great.
measure, through the journey, right?
Yeah.
Incrementally through the journey. Oh, my hair's sticking straight up.
I know. I'm like, yeah,
Anyway.
me too. Me too. I love though. I do love how the conversation, the words we use, in the change management space are starting to shift, and we
Yes,
might be saying the same things but slightly different, but really the key takeaway that I'm getting here is that the way that we interact and work with people, it's all about building that connection, helping them recall
100%.
those moments of, I can do this, like building that
Yes,
confidence as you guide them through that discomfort that goes along with growth and learning and change. So
absolutely.
I think
And, I-
more
and I'm,
people are buying into that
yeah.
understanding too.
And I love what you just said. And I fell on one of my own cardinal rules when we were talking about resistance. So
Yeah.
I've sort of changed the terminology for resistance as well,
Yeah.
because I think when I think of resistance, and since it's a video, this will make sense. I think of this. I resist, and this essentially means go away, right?
Yeah.
But if I tell you I have an objection, I have an objection, it
Yes.
feels more like I have an objection, but I'm open to listening
That's a
and
great way
working
of
with
thinking
you.
about it.
So
Yeah.
I do agree with you that words matter. Semantics, as it may be, does matter. It
Yeah.
does matter. So I am changing my terminology on a lot of things.
I really do like that though. I mean, that
Yeah,
makes it more as you were saying that, I was thinking about how in, some of the clients that I'm currently working with, for example, the concept of resistance, when you've made a multi-million dollar investment and there's a deadline, they care. At the same time, it's like, it's going to happen
Hmm.
regardless, right? And so when you think about resistance, it does come up with that negative connotation that I'm putting my feet in the ground, when really it's people wanting to feel heard, have their, because they
Absolutely.
probably, the impacted stakeholders likely didn't have a choice in whether or not that change was happening. And so that I object is such is more inclusive. And I think leaders up and down the chain will understand, okay, I want to listen, I want to understand, versus, I'm putting my feet in the ground because it's going to
Yes.
happen anyway. So get with, what was it? Get with the job, or leave, or something like
Yeah,
that, whatever the
exactly.
saying was. So that's just such a great way of framing
Yeah.
it for
Well, and
everyone to
I
understand.
really like something else that you just said, because it also speaks to me very much. And that is, you mentioned leaders.
Hmm.
I think that as an industry for change, we've kind of overlooked in some ways the role of the people leader and how
Hmm.
instrumental they are in, not only awareness and activating change, but really reinforcing that change, right? And
Hmm.
a lot of my practice is about the behavior model. And if you think about Pavlov's dog, that old experiment,
Hmm.
the number one element of that, even though all three elements were important, was the dog treats, the
Yeah.
reinforcement.
Yes. Yeah.
And leaders really, they have more day-to-day contact than your average change professional ever will with their team
Hmm.
members. They indirectly control that person's paycheck. They set
Hmm.
priority and direction. And a good leader should know what motivates people, which is different from you to me, right?
Right.
Where we as change professionals, sort of on the outside looking in, we don't have that relationship with all those team members. So I think there's a role for leaders to play, and it plays not only in traditional change management, but also here, in
Yeah.
human-centric change, because again, they better understand, what motivates me, what makes you tick,
Yeah.
than I ever will. So sort of industry wide, if we think about change, I think there needs to be more movement on leaders' role in change,
Hmm.
and it's not building a change plan, or creating one communication. It's really, how do you activate your team for human behavior, right? Which is really,
Yeah.
with change, we're really trying to get behavior repeated, repeated, repeated.
Yeah.
So I love that you brought up leaders, because that's another topic that I am very passionate about, training and coaching leaders on how to be, more rounded when it comes to driving their teams through change.
Yeah, and that really does speak to that human-centric component.
Yes.
How would you, I have run across this myself and with people that I work with, as a change lead on a project or a change,
Mhm.
working with people leaders, you don't necessarily have the budget to give to the people leaders, or the
Mhm.
means to, throw a party, or whatever the, the
Yeah,
need, whatever
yeah.
the people manager wants to do, the people leader wants to do. How would you coach someone who is a change management practitioner on what they can do practically, to support that people leader reinforcement piece without having
Absolutely.
budget authority,
Yeah.
those type of things?
Yeah. So when I work on change, I like to make it easy for people. Right.
Hmm.
So for both leaders, SMEs, change champions, I create toolkits
Hmm.
that they can, simply pull together. And my toolkits always have, okay, share this, but here's some discussion questions for feedback, right? Dialogue. I'm trying to make it easy, because you and
Yeah.
I both know that, if you're a leader and you come to me and I say, well, I need you to do XYZ, but I don't really tell you or give you a frame for how to do it, you're going to say, Michelle, I've got a million other things to do. And so if I
Hmm.
do it, it's going to be, I wrote an email, done, check, right? And we both
Right.
know that's not effective.
Right.
So I try to enable those influencers, leaders, stakeholders as best I can
Hmm.
with toolkits, which could be a combination of talking points, but always ways to dialogue with their team and bring feedback back. Most of the changes that I've worked on kind of in my consulting have had no budget, zero.
Right.
So I've gotten scrappy and creative about creating videos and different things, that I could do myself to make it work. And again, providing leaders and champions, stakeholders with toolkits, things that they can take forward, and they don't really have to, I hate to say they don't really have to think about it, but I'm
Yeah.
just trying to make it kind of a one-stop shop for them.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. And that
Easy.
could include like recommendations on what to do to
Absolutely. Yeah.
reward or reinforce, which
Absolutely.
recognition goes a long way too. I think people, really,
Absolutely.
appreciate that. And that's a great way of
Absolutely.
reinforcing a change
Yes,
behavior.
yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and getting creative, I've done some games, I've done a whole bunch of other stuff, and again, brought leaders into that, or here, use this, and it's
Yeah.
created, free, ready to go. And I also try to, again, not overwhelm them. So, here's one thing for this 2 weeks or this 3 weeks. Now here's one thing, right? We can't expect them, in addition to their full-time job, to do, here's 25 things I need you to do. Like, that's not going
Right.
to happen,
Yeah.
right? Got to make it easy, got to make it manageable.
This is super helpful advice. And I agree that less is more, simple is better. And you've given some really incredible tips and
Oh, thanks, Jess.
ideas on how to, lead change from a human centric perspective. What else would you, I mean, anything else that you would love to impart, have people in our profession, have business leaders, have people who are thinking about getting into change management, drop it into their space and say, hey, think about this as you're moving forward over 2023, how we can all
Yeah.
collectively embrace this human centric aspect of leading and influencing change.
Yeah. So, one other thing that I love, and it doesn't work in all scenarios, is, and let me explain first before I tell you what I'll tell
Yeah.
you what it is, and then I'll tell you why it doesn't always work. If we can give people the power of individual choice,
Mm,
and how I would frame that is, me as a change leader, I say, oh, the change needs to go like this, whatever that is, right? And then they get working in the field, and you've been there with this as well, and it's like it doesn't really work that well. I'm not in their shoes. I don't really, it doesn't exactly match up to what they need. So can we, in situations where there's things don't have to be done exactly a certain way. So if
right.
you think about compliance or legal or financial or regulations, things have to be done step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. We
Mhm.
can't vary, no variation. But for other things, if there's not a need like that, and we don't have any negative up or downstream impacts from some variation where possible, what's wrong with power of individual choice? And I don't mean that we're going to do, we're going to do things, 72 different ways, right? But more the idea of, if the end goal is met, right? If the change,
Mhm.
if whatever we're doing, the change is meeting the ROI, and we can allow people a little bit of autonomy and flexibility in how they do it and improve and optimize it. We not only get buy-in, we're going to get a lot more benefits and less pushback. And
Yeah.
again, I realize that might be a bit controversial, because there's a lot of things that have to be done, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And certainly I'm not saying, again, that we want everybody to do their own thing in 72 different ways, right? But I think there's something to that when I'm allowed to have some autonomy, flexibility, and power of choice. That
Yeah.
makes it feel a little less rigid, and I'm a little bit more happy and available to buy into it and move forward with it.
I love that so much. I think about it as, empowering people to power change.
Yes.
And that's what you
Yes.
were describing to me. And I'm just using different words because you said it much more
Yeah.
eloquently.
Yeah. Yeah. No, no, no.
But I really liked how you described that. And you're really hitting too on what people need to feel like they can't. The choice is, part of it. The control piece, I think, bringing back a little bit
Oh,
of
it's
control, because if
huge.
change happens, you sort of lose that, and that makes people uncomfortable. And so what you're doing is giving that back in a
Yes.
way where you've
Yes.
got the foundation, and then you be an adult and you do your thing. So
Yeah.
I like
And
that a
and
lot.
kind of final thought, and it
Yeah,
does match with human centric change. Change is it's a team sport, is what I say,
absolutely.
or it takes a community, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about a community and sort of the governance, the rules, how communities form, that has to be there. and we've got to invite everybody in, right? We've got to, take them where they're at, invite them in, bring them forward, use all their ideas. That's all sort of part of, building that community, if you will. And I think when we do that, we're going to have more buy-in, we're going to have better uptick on change adoption, proficiency, and sustainment, and that should result in getting our ROI goals and outcomes of our changes or our projects and initiatives faster. And again, I'm not saying organizations are there. I think we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
But hopefully in this time that we've talked, a couple ideas for folks to put into their toolkit or things just to sort of marinate on, like how
Yeah.
would I bring that forward? How could I think about that? Would that work in my organization or with this project? Right?
Yeah.
I think any steps we make in this direction, Jessica, are a plus. I really do.
I agree with you. Thank you for being a thought leader in this and
Thank you so
driving the
much.
conversation and creating space for it. Awareness is half the battle, and just being open to thinking about how we do what we do in a different way is really valuable. So thank you for taking time today to share your wisdom with me and with Apogy's community. Really appreciate it. And where can people find you if they're
Yeah.
interested in taking your training or learning more about
Yeah.
what you do?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Jessica, for making the time for me. I loved the conversation.
Good, me too.
Very near and dear and close to my heart, loving the conversation. Michelle at changefit360.com or changefit360.com is where you can find me. I also, on my website, I actually have a blog right now about human-centric change,
Wonderful.
in
Okay.
addition to a bunch of other topics. So go and check it out, people, and let me know, or Jessica know, what you think. And
Yeah.
yeah, thanks so much, Jessica.
You're so welcome. And are you on LinkedIn too, in case people want to reach out
Absolutely,
to you that way?
Jessica, I
Okay.
am. They can reach out
Yeah,
to me that way. I've loved our time together,
me too.
and
Thank you so much.
let's work on some more human-centric change, everybody, for 2023.
Yes, I'm with that. I'm with that. Well,
Whee!
thanks again. And yeah, have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thanks.